Okay, so welcome back to the channel. Thank you very much for all the positive feedback on the first video. I did not expect it, but here we are. I'm just gonna keep the videos coming. If you guys have any ideas on things that you'd like me to break down, or any questions that you have, just put them in the comments below or message me on Instagram. Yeah, like I'm just looking forward to sharing more and helping people any way I can. Also, before I get into the video, if anybody's interested in me mixing and mastering your songs, all my information is in the description below, so don't be afraid to reach out. But yeah, so the topic of this video is really mastering and how I can push them really loud and they don't lose a lot of their qualities. This is the thing when we start out mastering and not sure exactly what we're doing, we really tend to push things thinking that's how, that's the best way to get it loud. But really the thing is, and what I'm going to show to you today, it's all about how you bake loudness into a mix before you reach the mastering stage. And that's really how what clicked for me when I was trying to figure out how to master and how to keep my mixes what they sounded like and also add a bit onto it. I felt like in my early stages of mixing, when I was pushing things out to release, I really felt like I would get my mix to a point where I loved it, but I knew once I mastered it, it was going to be 15-20% worse. And I was just really bogged down by the fact that I get a really nice sounding mix and then I want to release it and push it out. I have to master it, and I just destroy all of my dynamics, and it really just it's such a horrible feeling to know you put in all this work and then you just have to crush it just to put it out on streaming services. But I want to show you today that that's not the case, and there's things that you can do to get around having to do that. And I think this will be really helpful if you're getting to that stage where your mixes sound good, but you just need that extra helping hand to get over the line. So as much as I'm going to show you in this session, this is more of not philosophical, but it's more of a conversation to be had rather than full on techniques that I'm going to be showing you. It's going to be a bit of mix of both. So I hope you enjoy a bit of talking as well as showing throughout the video. But yeah, so I'm just going to go straight into it. I'm going to start off really at the basics and just kind of see if I can give a simple understanding of what's happening when you're pushing into a limiter to master. When you're mastering, you're taking all of your, I'm going to show you here while I'm saying it. So for example, this is our beat here. I think there's just a clipper on it, but it's not fully crushed. So you can see there's peaks, there's different elements of it that's coming out. You have the kick. You can see here, this is the kick. You can just tell by the transient. This is the snare, and so on and so forth. All the parts in between are just the music and hi-hats probably. This is a hip-hop beat, so it's fairly easy to see what is what. But when you're mastering, essentially what you're doing is you're taking the top of those peaks and you're just cutting it off, which allows you to push the overall volume even more. So when you're talking about getting things loud, yes, doing that pushes it over a certain level, but while doing that, you're cutting the dynamics of your sound source. So this is why things sound crushed or even squashed or whatever term you want to use for it. What I want to show you today is you can cut these peaks while maintaining dynamics, and it's not all about just pushing into a limiter hoping to get loud. There's many steps involved in baking loudness into a sound source. So when you do get to that limiter, all you're doing is cutting off like a dB, 2 dBs of peaks rather than smashing at 6. And you're not only going to get it louder, you're going to get it with more dynamics, and it's just going to sound more natural. And also with the stuff that I'm going to show you baked in to your sound source, it is really going to just add, it's going to add harmonics is the exact word for it, that's not already in the music. So the first thing that I would do really is take it with the drums. Now I'm not going to go through exactly step by step what I'm doing. I'm just going to explain more the ideas of what I'm doing, and you can apply to them to whatever form you want. But a fantastic way to bake in loudness and add character and just push things through the sound source that isn't straight up loudness, it would be saturation and distortion. Now I've kind of went through the small bit in my last video, but it is vital to pushing things to a point and getting this kind of, it adds this character to sound sources that's really incredible. Okay, so I'm just going to load up a few of my favorite saturation and distortion units or plugins, I guess. The Decapitator, you're not going to really understand it until you use it and hear what it's doing exactly. And also it's a lot more in depth than I'll be able to explain in this video today. So I would urge you to go research these topics. But my job, I just feel I want to bring these up just so you have a starting point to figure, you know, I'm not going to explain it entirely to you. I just don't have enough time in this video, but I can show you at least what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So this is the Decapitator. I would usually drive this. There's different colors here. I think this one's doing the Neve. This one is I can't remember exactly what, but there's 6 emulations here with different characters. And you can hear that by adding these characters into your sound source. I do it on drums. I do it on vocals. Literally anything that I want to give a bit more drive to and a bit more, it just pushes it up. And again, I wouldn't use it all the way. I'll push the drive up to a nice point and then mix in with the dry wet knob how much of it I like. Moving on, this is a really simple plugin. This is a stock Pro Tools plugin, but it's a pretty iconic one. Really known for this distortion feature here. If you put 0.2 on a kick, come back to me and hear the difference. It's ridiculous. And then finally, the last form of this I'd like to show is Spectre. This is pretty much similar to the Decapitator, except you can actually choose what frequency you want to add in, the harmonic, saturation, and whatever form you want here. There's all different types. You can have a warm sound, tube sound, tape sound, the diode, and yeah, that's, you're getting into your odd and even order harmonics. You're really just adding in things to the sound source. So if, say I had a kick, I wanted to give a bit more drive, the low mids, I boost up here. And you have your mix knob down here that you can pull to your taste. So it's all about just blending in things to sound sources to make them seem bigger and make them have more impact rather than just turning up the volume. Because like I said, you're limited when you're only turning up the volume, because at the end of the day, that's just going to get caught in the final stage of mastering. So there's no point to do that anyway. This is a way to bake loudness and feel and, you know, energy into sounds without that volume knob. So since we're on that topic, I'm going to bring back up the black box again. This is seriously a game changer. I mostly just use it on drums. I know people can use it on anything. A lot of people use it in mastering stage. I like to do it before mastering. I like to put it on my drum boss, no matter what genre, whether it's hip hop, whether it is rock, any genre, pop, I don't care. I'm putting it on my drum boss. Essentially what it's doing, I have this setting here. I'll show you. It's like 60, 66, 54 or 57. It really depends. This one controls more the low end, this one more the high end. Saturation at 30. And I essentially just leave this the way it is and just mix in as much of it as I want. And when I'm doing that, in my meter in the top right up here, it is just taking the level down. So let's just say, for an example, I had these drums hitting at -6 dB on my meter. And if you're confused, the 0 is the highest, and then it goes minuses. So the more minus you have, the lower in volume your signal is. So say it's reading at -6. I put this on. I slowly dial in the mix knob. The volume stays the same, but all of a sudden on my meter, it's reading as -8. So just there, with it sounds pretty much the same, if not some would argue better, because you're adding in harmonic, saturation, distortion. You are taking the volume of it from -6 to -8, which is giving you 2 extra dBs that you can push in your limiter. So all of a sudden now you've got an extra 2 dB in mastering. And it's all these small steps that I'm doing now that allow me to get louder in mastering without that limiter. So this is all making more sense the more as I'm describing it. So imagine I could do that across the board. Imagine I could tame the vocals. Imagine I could tame the guitars if there's bass. Imagine if I could just contain these elements before I get to that final stage. Then I'd be laughing. So typically what I would do, as I just mentioned there with, you know, guitar, bass, vocals, it really just comes back down to the basics of using a compressor. If you really think about it, your peak of a vocal. Say you have a line of here, and the vocal goes across like this, and all of a sudden there's a big peak up here, and then it comes back down. That line is going to say equal, but when that peak hits, you're going to hit that point. If your limiter is up here, that's going to distort. So if you're wondering why your mixes are distorting even when you're mastering, it's because there's uncontrolled and untamed peaks that need to be controlled before you get to the mastering stage. This is why we use compressors. Obviously there is other reasons to use compressors. I like to use them for tone because each compressor is different, whether it's an 1176 or a waves, like an RVox, or even a distressor. There's many different types of vocal or not plugins, but just vocal compressors that give you different characters and different tones. At the end of the day, we're just trying to control the dynamics of each element so that they don't get crushed later on. And not only does it make the sound more, even, you don't have a really loud part of the vocal just hitting you out of nowhere, but it also saves you later on when you're trying to master and trying to get things loud, so you don't have these crazy peaks. Another way that I would go about that is also just using Vocal Writer, or automatically, going through each individual vocal. Like what I usually do is, now I only started doing this recently, but I send my vocal to a pre-vocal bus, and I literally go along like this, catch the parts that are cutting a small bit, and just literally ride the vocal volume with just automation, so that you just get this more evenly shaped vocal in terms of volume. This also helps when you're going into compressor, because sometimes when you go into a compressor, that compressor, it works nice, you get it to a nice sound, and then all of a sudden you get this really loud vocal, and it slams, and then you're like, oh, that doesn't sound nice, that sounds over compressed. That's what people talk about. So if I control the volume myself, then I can go into compressor and not necessarily use it as a volume control, but more as a tone creator, and use it for its tonal characteristics rather than just using it as a volume writer. I want to make sure everything's perfect before I hit processing, so I can use processing when it's needed and when it's necessary, and not just push everything through, random chains that you find off YouTube. Like, everything has to be done with a purpose and an intent, and that's kind of what I'm trying to get across. I could show you exactly what I'm doing right now, but it doesn't matter. It's all about the intent and how you use it, and knowing why you need to use it. So I'm just going to show you the mix before now. I say love, don't I say trust. You slow down as I sped up. I fell in love with the things I trust. It's hard to be even when you're always chasing love. So as you can hear, everything's really clear. You can hear the kick, lovely dynamics. I do not want to mess with what I have here. And if I was simply mastering, if I didn't do this mix, if someone sent me this mix, I would want to try keep, the qualities of this mix as much as possible. So this first EQ move here is actually the GOAT, Dave Pensado's technique. He puts this on his mix bus every time, and I tried it once and I was like, this sounds incredible. So what did I do? I took it and I stole it, and that's exactly what I encourage everyone to do. Just go out there, look at the pros, see exactly what they're doing. I've spent so many hours just watching every hit song being mixed. I would recommend going on trying to get a license with Mix and the Masters. I've literally seen pretty much every top song ever being mixed, and exactly what they're doing, and the pros are showing it. It's all on the internet. So anyone can really learn. It's just about, are you willing to put in that time, the time and hours to fully understand what's going on, and not just copy what they're doing. Because in here, I'm going to describe to you what's going on, and if you were to copy it, cool, but I really want you to understand what's going on so that you know why you're doing these things. So here, I'm cutting out 0.5 in the sub. This is to help me, again, in mastering. A lot of times, if we have too much sub information clustering up, when you push that through a limiter, the limiter's around 20 hertz, 30 hertz, you can't really hear those anyway, but the limiter struggles. The limiter really just clamps down when you have too much information there. So just pulling back 0.5 dB on the shelf there really just helps. Then moving on, I'm doing a boost at 40 hertz. It's a 1 dB boost, just giving me that low end back. So the sub is coming out, but the low end is pushing up. So you're almost giving this effect of the sub. Because I mean, the difference between 20 and 40 hertz is very. I mean, it's pretty much inaudible, but it's a feel thing. You feel it. So yeah, boosting at 650. This is giving me that low mid. Well, not necessarily low mid, but low mid to just mid range kind of push. It's really tiny. It's 1 dB. It's not crazy moves, you know. And then finally a 2.5K shelf, so just giving me that high, that just after that the mid, so high mids to high shelf. Just that sparkly top end. It's just pushing that out. So I then move into my clipper for limited or for soft clipping. I know that I do this to my drums before I send it to mastering, which by sending it I mean to myself, but I like to do it in two different processes so that I can almost switch perspectives and just be like, okay, now I'm going to mix it, now I'm going to master it. So you have to come at it as if you're two different people. With standard clip here, I'm literally just shaving the peaks a small bit just so that my limiter doesn't work as hard at the end of the day, at the end of the chain. So this is kind of what I was getting to earlier, but I'll show you just how much I'm cutting off. I say love, don't I say drugs. You slow down as I sped up. I fell in love with the things I trust. It's hard to be even when you're always chasing love. How can you be safe? So what you can see is it's really just catching when the vocal and the kick are coming together on top of each other. It's catching those peaks. And those are the peaks that would really get distorted when you're limiting them later on. So by soft clipping them now, I'm doing it in a really nice way that's pleasing to the ear, but also saves me my dynamics for later on. Then moving into my mastering compressor. Usually this is my Boss compressor, just for the mix bus. But this song, I was experimenting a bit, and I just wanted to use this in the mastering stage. I'm not think I'm going to use it very heavy-handedly, but is pretty small amount of gain reduction. I say love, don't I say drugs. You slow down as I sped up. This compressor is known as the kind of glue compressor. Gives a bit of glue to your mix. Just brings everything together, makes it feel like it's moving. I have slow attack, really quick release. So again, pushing out that attack of everything and keeping the transients, not hitting them with the compressor. It's allowing them to come through, and then the compressor moves. Then I'm moving into this Michelangelo, whatever you want to call it. I don't care, right? It's my name, I know. Yeah, this is a cool, it's a really broadband EQ, and there's a bit of a saturator in there as well. I'm not using too much of it. 0.46 I'm driving. Essentially what you're doing is you're using this as kind of a creative EQ in terms of if you were listening to a song on your speakers, how would you like to, just give a bit of low end, give a bit of mid, touch a bit the highs, give it, you know what I mean? This is exactly what I'm doing here with these low, mid, high airs. You can see that I've them kind of similar, you know what I mean? I'm boosting kind of the same things, but the curves actually move with this particular EQ dependent on how much you push the others. So even though it looks like I'm boosting them all at the same area, the curves are drastically changing dependent on which band I'm affecting. And in this situation, I'm affecting all the bands. It's really like an effect where when I move one, the other moves. So that's why I'm pushing them in a way that sounded nice to me. Again, you should not copy these settings. These settings worked for this song. But it does not mean that it's going to work for any other song. I mean, I would never put this exact setting on another mix. Like I would do it, load the plugin up if it needed it, if I wanted that EQ sound of this particular Michelangelo EQ, and I would just go individually through and see what the sound is. It's not the settings, it's how it sounds when I listen back to it. Next one is this Oxford inflator. This is really known as the kind of cheat code to loudness. You just put it on, you turn this effect up, you push up this curve, and it just sounds good. Like I'll show you with and without. Like it really does just give it kind of clears the mix up, and it just brings it forward in a really weird way. It almost like takes the it just opens the curtain in front of a window kind of thing. It's hard to describe, but I'll give you a quick.
I say love, don't I say drugs. You slow down as I sped up. I fell in love with the things I trust. It's hard to be even when you always chase.
You can just hear the mix come up, and there's not much level in that really. It's kind of, it is doing what it says it's doing. It's just giving you more, and it's just baking in more to that sound source. So next I'm coming into the God particle. This plugin is used by pretty much a lot of people. This is made by Jason Joshua. He's one of the best mixing engineers, I mean, ever. If you look up his credits, you'll see everything he's done. He's fantastic, but he really gives his secrets away to everyone, and this plugin is no different. This plugin is actually based originally off this Ozone 4 kind of technique, and this was really popular like maybe 10 years ago, and a lot of mixing engineers used it. Maybe not 10 years ago, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but yeah, there was this technique where they would use Ozone 4 and just have all these different parts of Ozone 4 working, and that would go on your mix bus, and it sounded incredible. So after that got popular, in Pro Tools you actually cannot use Ozone 4 anymore, I think. Like you can't like natively use it. You have to use like a VST like patcher. So I tried that out for a bit, it worked, but then Jason Joshua released this plugin, which is a God particle, which is doing that and even more. This there's like I think there's multi-band compression in this. There's just it's doing exactly what that Ozone was doing. With there's like an imager in it, like a stereo widener, and everything's baked into this. Now the setting that Jason uses himself is at 100. What I like to do is start at 0, push it up to around that 100, and kind of dial it back to a point and see what's too much and what's not enough, and just find a perfect medium between that. And then finally I'm just running into Ozone. So as I show you my Ozone settings, you're going to see that I have 2 limiters here, and also that I'm not doing a lot of gain reduction with them, and that's kind of all due to all the things that I was doing earlier to push the loudness into this mix. So we'll start off. I just have this, if I'm being honest, this was with Master Assistant. What I like to do is just turn on the Master Assistant, let it hear it out, then delete everything. Usually I keep the dynamic EQ and the clarity. I'll come back to the clarity in a second. With the dynamic EQ, I just let Ozone find out the bands that are moving. These really as well are coming down like minus 0.5 dB, like really small moves. So I just trust Ozone with that, and I listen to them sometimes as well to make sure that they're not removing elements that I don't want to remove, but I usually trust what's going on here. Then with the clarity, I like to find the frequency that I use the clarity for, because it does what it says essentially. It's just clarity. It gives a bit of top end, but it just gives a nice boost to that area. But I only mix in a small bit of it. I don't want too much of it. I'm not giving it at these high values. Like I really like to just keep it low. So I just bring it down to 0, push it too much, and then bring it back to a point that I feel is right. For this song in particular, it was 13. Then when it comes to when I figure out how much I want to push things, I like to just hit delta, and I like to catch it just before it does any gain reduction. So I don't want any gain reduction, but I want to just catch the clips of the kick just tiny bit. Like when you hear the low end coming through this first limiter, then that's the point where I leave it. This is just driving my next final actual limiter. This is just the pre-limiting stage. So this is on the analog setting, and yeah, I push this into the actual maximizer, and this is the final part of the master.
I say love, don't I say drugs. You slow down as I sped up. I fell in love with the things I trust. It's hard to be even when you're...
So as you can see, I'm getting a maximum of like 2 dB of reduction and of limiting, and on our meters,
I say love, don't I say drugs. You slow down as I sped up. I
Yeah, we've got the mix to about -7 lofts. Maximum RMS is like -4, -3, which is really, really loud. Again, I could have pushed this mix louder if I wanted to, but I didn't feel it needed it. If anything, I could have actually drawn it back. With Spotify, they bring your stuff back to about -14 anyways, but there is still a bit of theory that the louder you bake it in, the louder it still sounds in Spotify, which is relatively true, but I'm still trying to figure out exactly what's the perfect balance to leave it at. That's still something that changes all the time, and nobody really knows what's the best level to leave your mix at for Spotify. You don't want them messing with your mixes. Yeah, that's pretty much everything that I got in this video. Shout out to A3 as well for letting me use their song as an example in this video. Go check them out. Their link will be in the description. And like I said at the start of the video, if you're interested in me mixing or mastering any one of your songs, don't be afraid to reach out. All my information is in the description. And yeah, thank you very much for watching.